Thank you very much, John. If I could have the panel members come up. While they're doing that, I'm going to attempt to answer some of the questions that came up. First of all, is how can other folks benefit from the America's Cup? Actually, the clubs will be participating with the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary to provide security and vessel control in the bay. Many of the clubs, including Oakland Yacht Club, where I keep my boat, have visitors docks. We're already getting a lot of requests for the visitors docks. And then in Oakland and the estuary, you have Oakland Yacht Club, Encinal Yacht Club, Alameda Island, and other yacht clubs. Already we're seeing increased excitement with respect to the expansion of our youth programs. Folks calling up and showing up, offering to crew for racing and other activities. So the excitement is building. And then finally, there's going to be certainly expanded opportunities within the maritime industry, including things like supporting the Corps of Engineers debris mission. I would just hate to think what would happen if one of those 72-foot vessels at speed hit a bit of debris in the bay. So, with that, I'm going to start once again with a little bit of history, and going back again, as John did before, to that first America's Cup in 1851. Again, imagine a yacht racing event in England, and the prize is the Royal Yacht Squadron's 100 Guinea Cup. So we're watching this race. In attendance is Queen Victoria. So she's watching, and she's watching the finish line. And here comes this upstart schooner coming across from the United States, from America, on her own bottom to race in the event, crossing the finish line ahead of everybody else. Not a yacht, but actually representing fishing, working vessels. So, Queen Victoria says to her folks, perhaps, I don't know, perhaps trying to salvage a potentially embarrassing situation. And she says, who is second? And one of her attendants replies to her, Your Majesty, there is no second. And that set up the America's Cup. Again, the panel, the purpose of this panel will focus on the event's logistics and infrastructure needs to make America's Cup a success. Current Bay Maritime users need to prepare for and anticipate the impacts of America's Cup. The goal of the session is to discuss the necessary planning, logistics, and coordination in place to ensure maritime impacts are minimal during the exciting event. And I would now like to introduce the panelists. First, Captain Bliven. Captain Matt Bliven serves as the Coast Guard's principal coordinator for the 34th America's Cup Sail Racing event. He works with local, regional, and federal agencies, industry, and public stakeholders in the Bay Area to align Coast Guard efforts for this prestigious international safety event. So welcome to Captain Bliven. Next is Guy Bjerke, who is the manager of the Bay Area region for the Western States Petroleum Association. That is WISPA, or affectionately known as WISPA, based in Concord. He's a former mayor and council member for the city of Concord, and he has over 20 years experience in Bay Area issues through his governmental affairs work for the business community and building industry. John Craig is the third member of the panel. He is responsible for conducting the races of America's Cup World Series, the aforementioned Louis Vuitton Cup, America's Cup Challenger Series, and America's Cup Finals. John is a board member of U.S. Sailing. He has been the race manager at San Francisco's St. Francis Yacht Club for over 10 years. He has run approximately 300 regattas on San Francisco Bay. He's worked closely with many of the top sailors in the world throughout his career. And finally, David Olson on the end. David Olson is well known in the San Francisco Bay Area as a businessman and philanthropist. He has served on many foundations and service-oriented boards. Currently, he is chairman and CEO of Olson Steel, a large West Coast steel fabricator. Among his passions are classic and vintage boats and yacht racing. Again, welcome to the panel. So with that, we'll start with Captain Bliven, who does have a short presentation.
Thank you, Lynn. You can just put it on slide number 8. I won't bother with much of the presentation on the slides because I think it would just distract me and frustrate you. But we will put it on slide 8, which you may be able to discern the notional race area. I'll talk about that later. So the title of this is Who's in Charge? It's like Where's Waldo? And I don't think we'll have an answer for that once we're done with this panel. But I would say if activity involves the water in San Francisco Bay, the Coast Guard is certainly involved. And we want to be involved. But we recognize we can't be in charge of any one thing, and we have to work very closely with our maritime partners to build consensus and agreement and cooperatively to make this event a success. So the Coast Guard has been involved with the America's Cup for a long time, not just here in San Francisco, but in Newport and San Diego. Anytime the America's Cup is held in America, the Coast Guard has some sort of a role. Planning here in San Francisco with the Coast Guard has been ongoing for over a year now, and I've been involved with this project since last summer. Early on, we said we wanted to define 4 key focus areas for the Coast Guard. These areas are to ensure a safe and accessible waterway during the event, to enable the continuous smooth flow of commerce, to mitigate or minimize any environmental impact from this event, and also to ensure that we can continue our Coast Guard operations while the event is going on. And all those focus areas align with our statutory authorities. Those are the Captain Report, Captain Cindy Stowe, as she oversees operations and the safety of San Francisco Bay. We have essentially 2 primary federal actions that we are responsible for to make this event a success. So we have two federal actions. One is to issue the marine event permit for the America's Cup. And just as a frame of reference, the Coast Guard issues about 1,300 marine event permits a year here in San Francisco. And that includes events in San Francisco Bay, the Delta, all the way up to Lake Tahoe. So this is just one of 1,300 events that we will review. It is unique though because of the scope in terms of time and space, and also the fact that it's fast-moving boats with lots of spectators. And the other primary federal action is we're going to issue a special local regulation to create a closed area for the racing on central San Francisco Bay. And most events that occur in the Bay, whether it's a sailboat race or a kayaking outing or a swim from Alcatraz, those events are not enclosed. They have to engage with all the other maritime traffic that's occurring in the Bay. Rules of the roads are in place for vessels, and those vessels have to stay out of the way of each other. The America's Cup event, we envision, will have a closed course during those races. I want to mention that special local regulation. It's currently on the docket for a 90-day public comment period, which closes at the end of this month. So if you have a business or commerce on the Bay and you're not familiar with that regulation, I would encourage you to review it, make sure it meets your needs, and you don't have any concerns. If you do have concerns, you think the Coast Guard hasn't considered your business and your use of the Bay, we solicit your comments and your input to us to make sure that we've captured it. We've done a lot of outreach over the past 8 months in developing this rule, both with commercial entities, recreational users of the bay, environmental concerns, and also other agency partners to ensure we understand how the bay is used and we can incorporate that into this proposed rule. And a lot of that work has been through the Harbor Safety Committee. Key partners that we're working with, obviously, is America's Cup Race Management to ensure that we've created a race area that works for them. The city and the Port of San Francisco, and also the National Park Service. Golden Gate National Recreational Area and other park areas around San Francisco Bay have a lot of interest in this America's Cup because a lot of the venues will impact their park operations, and they also have jurisdictional waters in proximity to those park places, those park spaces that overlap with Coast Guard jurisdiction. So we're currently embarked with the Park Service, the Corps of Engineers, and the Presidio Trust on the National Environmental Policy Act, the NEPA review. We hope to release an environmental analysis of the event this summer for public comment as well. And finally, I've got the drawing of the race area up here. If you've seen any of the publicity about the America's Cup, the original envisioned race area was essentially the entire Central Bay. If you saw something in the newspaper, you saw maybe a dotted line went all the way around the San Francisco waterfront up to Sausalito and Marin and around Angel Island, and that was the original plan. I can tell you that the race area has shrunk because America's Cup has gotten a better idea of how much room they need for the AC-45s to race this summer and how much they envision the AC-72s will need. So it's gotten smaller, and that's also in recognition of the competing needs on the bay. So if you can envision yourself sitting at Aquatic Park and looking at Alcatraz, the race area would be extended from Crissy Field on your left, inside the Golden Gate Bridge, and go just past Alcatraz in 2012. In 2013, it would extend further all the way down to Pier 27, 29. It would extend all the way up to Alcatraz. So 2012, a race area that's roughly 2 miles wide by a mile north and south, and in 2014, a race area that's twice as big. So an AC-72 that might be doing 35 knots at its best speed will transition from one end of the race area to the other in approximately 10 minutes or less. In a 25-minute race, they may do 2 or 3 laps in that race area before finishing at the finish line in the vicinity of Pier 729 in the San Francisco waterfront. In developing that closed race area, which would be in effect on the race days from noon till 5 p.m. on those race days, we had to balance the commercial traffic that goes through one of 3 shipping lanes in San Francisco Bay, the commercial excursion and commuter ferries, even the small entities like commercial fishing, sand dredging, salvage, sand miners and dredging, and the small charter vessels, 6-pack and 12-pack vessels that want the ability to see the race course or to do their normal business. So we tried to create transit zones in the race area, no loiter zones, and even environmental buffer zones around Crissy Field and Alcatraz to reduce the amount of spectator activity that could encroach on those environmentally sensitive areas. And all that is built into this special local regulation. The Fleet Week model is a good model for much of this for America's Cup for the Coast Guard, but it's a much bigger box for us to manage. And one of the things we're trying to do is reduce the amount of spectator activity between the San Francisco waterfront and the race itself, so that the spectators ashore can see the race unobstructed. So that's a feature of the race area itself. So there's some gaps in what I want to say because I want to let John describe the racing itself. He's the person that's got the exciting information for you. And I also want to let the other speakers give their presentations. But I look forward to your questions afterwards. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Patrick. And Mr. Guy Bjerke would be the next panelist.
Thank you, Len. Good afternoon. I want to thank the Bay Planning Coalition for the opportunity to make these remarks today. The Western States Petroleum Association represents the petroleum industry in the 6 western United States. In the Bay Area, there are 5 refineries. Last year, if you attended this conference, I spoke to you briefly about the fact that California is a petroleum island. The fact that there are no crude pipelines coming in from other parts of the United States. And so that the crude that 13 refineries in California, the 5 refineries in the Bay Area refine, is increasingly coming from tankers, and especially as production in California's Central Valley holds steady or declines. And so the issue of ship traffic on the Bay is a very important issue to the local economy. And for us today, I am basically serving as a surrogate. We are just a small portion of the ship traffic on the Bay. There is a great deal of commercial ship traffic on the Bay that has to be accommodated in dealing with the America's Cup. Having said that, I want to make sure everyone is well aware that I don't think there's anyone in the Bay Area that is opposed to the America's Cup. Everyone supports the America's Cup, the benefits it's going to bring to our economy, and we think that the work that is being done to plan for a successful event by the Coast Guard, by the Park Service, and by the other agencies is very important, and we commend them. My comments today are designed to provoke further discussion and assure everyone is thinking ahead about the possible impacts and practical mitigation strategies. And my comments are aimed probably more so at the private sector, because I fully believe the regulators are moving in these directions, are understanding some of these concerns, and it's incumbent upon us in the private sector to also work with them and plan ahead as this event moves forward. So I have 5 questions or 5 concepts that I'd like you to think about as we discuss the America's Cup, and 5 recommendations to follow. The first is, we know when the races are occurring, and we know their impacts. But are we planning for the increased activities before and between the races? Are we planning for the practice schedules? Are we planning for the predictable increase in spectator and watercraft activities? Having recreational vehicles impeding the passage of another vessel that can only safely navigate within a narrow channel is a concern that both the private sector and the Coast Guard will need to address. Secondly, many of the deep draft vessels, arrivals and departures in inland waters, are tide time sensitive. Many of the refineries are up past Petroleum Shoal, and they can only come in or go out under narrow windows with the appropriate tides. Do we have enough resources? Do we have enough pilots, tug assists, and escorting available to accommodate all the possible movements during that narrow window? Third, will the public exposure of the America's Cup and the high visibility of the northbound traffic lane during racing events change how deep draft vessels choose to arrive or depart? Will everyone want to transit the bay at night? Think about it. If it's on camera constantly, the ship captains, those coming in, are going to be making decisions about how visible they want to be. Fourth, will race-related delays result in the increased need for bunkering operations to occur at anchor? And/or will vessels conserve their marine diesel oil by holding offshore to be in compliance with the emission control area and the California Air Resources Board zone, which will be effective in August 2012. Imagine literally a number, tens, maybe 20s, maybe 30s of ships hanging off the coast because they're trying to determine when is the best time to come into the bay and whether or not they get priority to come into the Bay and how the priority is determined. And fifth, and are we taking steps to educate first-time callers to San Francisco Bay so they don't experience a loss of propulsion failure due to fuel switching? Last year, 28% of first-time callers to the Bay experienced a loss of propulsion due to fuel switching. So our recommendations, or my recommendations, is that Bay Area industries need to discuss options and plan for the America's Cup with their marine operations. They need to do a desktop exercise to simulate your operations during the race. Do you know how this is going to affect you? Are you properly planning for it? Secondly, we must confirm that tug and pilot resources can sustain our movements based on our operational decisions made to accommodate the America's Cup. And third, we must support the San Francisco Harbor Safety Committee's practice guidelines. We must be sure that we are doing things appropriately from a private sector perspective to make sure our operations are safe during the race. Fourth, we must support and educate first-time visitors about the existing guidelines for fuel switching, so that if we know new vessels, first-time visitors coming, that we're alerting them to the fact that there are certain rules involved and there are certain risks involved. And lastly, we need to work closely with the Army Corps of Engineers to ensure that surveys and dredging activities are closely coordinated with the America's Cup. Commercial industries, and more specifically the refineries, believe that the America's Cup can't be a win-win. We generate a lot for the local economy. We think the America's Cup will add to the local economy. We want to see it done successfully. And we think these are some of the things the private sector needs to be thinking about as well as we approach these races later this summer and next year. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, guys. Our next panelist is Mr. David Olson.
Thank you. I'm here today representing basically the people that are looking just to be able to go out and have fun on the day with all this. So I think that the biggest thing that all of us need to really be concerned over is communication. I think that's so true in so many different ways of life or whatever, but when we look at the fact, and it's been talked about, that we have kind of an opening day or maybe a fleet week type of a potential congestion out there, how are we going to communicate? How are the different yachts, boats, personal watercraft, whatever, how are they going to get the message and how everything is going to be run? And I think that the Coast Guard's doing a great job along with the whole team to get all this organized, but I think that it's really going to be the key to this whole thing. When you really look at Fleet Week, I think, as I was saying, that's really the closest thing. That's where we have this restricted area, and you have boats around it, and then basically you have to somehow patrol that and monitor it. And I think that the commercial shipping, works through that very well over that period of time, but this is going to go on for a lot longer time. So once again, the big thing that I feel that we're going to be having out there, you think of maybe if there's 1,000 vessels out there, all different sizes. There is going to be, from what I understand, and I think John will maybe tell some more on that there's going to be a VIP area where people, large companies, et cetera, are going to spend a lot of money to have kind of front row seats. I don't think that then you have all the rest of the boats, let's say, and are they going to try to intermingle, get through there, all that. It's going to be, take some real coordination to make sure that it is done safely. The other thing that basically I think that has been already talked about a little bit is that this is going to be a unique race situation. One, these are very fast. Two, there's a whole lot of technology and TV coverage and internet coverage and everything else that's going to be out there. And I think that people are really going to realize that the distance that the closeness that you can get to the actual races is going to be you're going to see a lot more when you're watching it on your TV. So it'll be interesting to see how it all develops. And I think this summer we'll get the first showing of what it's all going to be about. I think that there's been a lot of good coordination, I know, through different marinas and yacht clubs and everybody else on how we're going to try to deal with other people wanting to come in and visit and slips and all those types of things. For the, I believe really, and I'm not sure how much there is right now in the East Bay here, whether it's Oakland or Berkeley or whatever, that there's going to be a lot of demand and requirements for people wanting to be able to bring their boats in and find a slip or a place to tie up. So, from the overall, I think it's going to be an exciting deal for all the boating that is on the bay, and I think whether there are 500 or 1,000 boats that are out there on opening day, etc., it'll be really something spectacular for the whole world to see, and I think the Bay Area is very fortunate to have it being held here.
Thank you very much. And finally, John Craig.
Thanks for spending the afternoon and hanging in there. I guess I'm here to talk about who's in charge of the America's Cup. As Captain Bliven pointed out, probably not going to be able to give you an answer by the end of this session. There was a reference to a trophy that was the 100 Guinea Cup that Yacht America won. When Yacht America won that trophy, they took it back to the New York Yacht Club, which the Commodore of the New York Yacht Club at the time was actually one of the syndicate owners of the Yacht America. And they sold the boat. They also donated the trophy to the New York Yacht Club. And attached to that trophy was the deed of gift. And that deed of gift is a document that has been in the courts more than any of us could ever imagine. It was one of the most contested pieces of paper in sports. And it's also one of the things, or the documents, that control or run the America's Cup. So that's one of the pieces of paper that really dictates how the game is played.
You could have just sat here.
So the second document is called the protocol. And the protocol document is one that is established between the defender and what is called the challenger of record, or in this case, another team. And what happens is the two sit down and create the rules and the platforms that we race in and how the racing is going to occur. So in this case, you have Oracle Racing, which is the defender, and the challenger of record is Artemis Racing. And they have created a protocol, and that is what we are bound as race management to run the event to. And it creates some problems for sure, because all of these documents are in place well before we get to the table. So some of this we have to live with and try and work around. But those are the two really significant pieces of paper that really run the show. Within the current protocol, there's a group that's called the Event Authority, and that is America's Cup Event Authority. And they are given the job of doing the corporate side of the business, working with the venues, and also putting on the event. But they are really under direction from the protocol and the deed of gift. Within that, there's this independent group which is called the Race Management Group. And we're fortunate in that we don't have to answer to any of the teams per se, although we consult them all the time. But race management is the one that actually puts the racing on. And so myself is the principal race officer, works under Ian Murray, who is the regatta director. And one of the goals that race management has always had is to be able to go back to any venue that we've been at. And we hope to be able, as John mentioned earlier, to continue to come back to San Francisco again and again and again. And one of the things that I have to say here is that the partnerships and the help and assistance that we've had from everybody in the Bay Area has been great, and we look forward to continuing that. A little bit about how we're going to manage this beast. One of the things that came out of the, not necessarily the protocol, but the desire from Mr. Ellison and Mr. Coots to make this a sport that could be accessed publicly was to bring it into the Bay, or bring it close to shore. And for the World Series events that we've been running around the world, I can tell you that I get the phone call probably once a regatta, John, you need to move the course closer to the beach. So one of the things that also came out was this television platform and the need for viewership, and viewership turns into dollars. And a gentleman by the name of Stan Honey, who some of you may know, created Sports Vision. And Sports Vision is the company that brought to all of us the glowing hockey puck, and as a Canadian I take a little offense to that, but also brought the first down marker yellow line in the NFL, the K-Zone for Major League Baseball, and all the graphics you see on NASCAR. And so Stan was asked, also being a world-renowned sailor himself, was given the opportunity to tell this story for sailing and lay these online graphics that you see if you go to the YouTube or the videos. You can see these online graphics that are overlaid with live pictures. One of the things that came out of that was that the technology has 2-centimeter accuracy. And so when you track the boats, which we do for the TV, they can actually track them within 2 centimeters of where they are. So being lucky, I guess, I looked at that and said, well, as far as running races, wouldn't that be a great tool to have? And so we added that to our race management platform, allowing us to run races. So now with the ability to track the boats with 2-centimeter technology, for starting and calling boats over the line early, it's a lot easier to let the computers do it. Additionally, what it enabled us to do is lay virtual boundaries on the water that would keep the teams in the box. So if you envision the box at Fleet Week, where you've got all the boats lined up against the edge, what we're able to do is, or the spectator boats lined up to that hard edge, what we're able to do is overlay onto the water that the boats will see with their computers, boundaries that keep them inside the arena. So basically, we have the ability to make or create an area that will ensure that the teams stay inside that box, and if they go outside that box, they get a penalty. So there's a big incentive for them to stay inside. And what that allows us to do is manipulate the course to even smaller than what you see in the special local regulation. So while we'll be racing within that box that the special local regulation has, we'll actually have another box inside that, which will be a virtual one seen by the boats. The additional thing that we've done is we realize that we're going to be taxing the resources of a lot of on-water enforcement. And so we created a marshal program, which we put 100 people through. And to do this, we've gone to a lot of the local yacht clubs that we realize have volunteers that would be very excited to participate. And this is a vehicle with which they can do to help us keep that secure area. And we look to do another 100 volunteers here in the next 2-3 months to get our numbers up to 200. And then with the support of the clubs, these marshals will be able to help us maintain that box area with approximately 30 additional boats each day. Finally, as far as our assets go, we look to our signal boat, which has the ability to lay all these boundaries and do all these wonderful things. Also has what we hope the communications center in conjunction with the Coast Guard alongside us, or actually with us on the boat, to make sure that it's seamless between what we're trying to do on the races and what we need to have happen so that everybody can have a good time in the water. I guess a couple fun facts. I just got back from Naples last week, and we just had our another one of our World Series events, number 4. And just to give you an idea, on shore on a rainy day, and I mean rainy, there was an estimated 180,000 people on the shore, and there was 250,000 they estimated watching from the balconies and up the hillside as it went. It was quite a spectacle. The prize giving, we had 15,000 people show up, more than we were prepared for. Italians showing their love for the cup itself. And then the last one was for us, which was it was the first time. On one of the days on Saturday, we had wind conditions that were such that they were 25 knots. And we can race in 25 knots because we've done that before. Our motto is 3 knots to 33. And hopefully we'll be able to stick with that. That being said, due to the sea state and the large waves rolling in, we were in a launch area where we couldn't actually launch the boats on one side. And so we lost that day of racing, which for us was actually pretty sad because we were tied into TV so tightly that they had to get something out of the can. But we're hoping that that doesn't happen, and got another event in Venice and starting on the 12th. That's it for me.
While you're getting your questions together, I'm going to do a very quick recap. What you've heard from the panelists here is, number one, who's in charge? And it's at least clear to me that the U.S. Coast Guard is in charge in cooperation with all of us. So that should give us a lot of confidence. We also learned about 4 key focus areas. Safe waterways, always number 1. The smooth flow of commerce, also very important to us. To mitigate any and all environmental impacts. And of course, the importance of continuing Coast Guard operations. We also heard an acknowledgement of the extraordinary planning that's going into this effort. Again, impact mitigation, but we heard the need to plan for the practice sessions, all the things that come before and afterwards. The importance of planning for deep draft navigation, especially those vessels that are tight and time sensitive. Public exposure changes and how the America's Cup will influence the public's perception on deep draft navigation. Bunkering, and probably not discussed, but also perhaps lightering in the bay, and the importance of that to us. And finally, education for the first-time callers, and the loss of propulsion that can come from change of fuel when you switch from bunkers to other fuels, such as diesel. We also learned about the importance of communication between all users of the bay, the racing boats, other recreational users, fishing, commercial, navigation, everything. The importance of taking our lessons learned from other events we've had in the bay, including fleet work, and incorporating to make these other lessons to make America's Cup a success and this unique racing situation. And finally, the overflow, the indirect impacts as they relate to other folks in the bay. Finally, we obtained a little bit more of a historical perspective from John, learned about the deed of gift, which has always confused me even as a racer, the organization, the event authority, and finally, all important, management. And with that, I'm going to take your questions. First question, communications. How are you going to control private airplanes and the helicopters who are going to want to observe this event? And if I could do a second part, how are the Sea Scouts participating in this event? And perhaps, Captain, you take this?
I'll answer the first question. There was initial push by the city of San Francisco and the state to try to get this America's Cup event designated as a NSSE event, National Special Security Event. DHS has determined it doesn't reach that threshold. It will likely be listed as a SEER level 3 event, and if they get VIPs visiting San Francisco during a portion of the event, then they may reconsider on that designation. So they also were looking for some sort of a aviation temporary flight restriction, so many thousand feet up. The city's desire was, for security, but also to reduce the ambush marketing aspect that you pointed for. The Coast Guard has a concern about not having any type of safety area in the air, because this event includes an air component, 3 helicopters at all times. So we went back, discussed with FAA the best way we could handle this, and we think the answer will be a notice to airmen notice beforehand, informing all local aviators, both excursion helicopters, news helicopters, and private pilots of the event, as well as good outreach to those entities before the event to satisfy that concern. It also helps that America's Cup has ACTV is providing their video footage free to all the news agencies, so there shouldn't be any desire or need for media helicopters to be in the air. I think that satisfied the city as well as the risk.
Thank you. Can one of the panels take on the Sea Scouts question?
We are actually in the process of working out our youth plan. It actually has 2 components. One is that we look to run a youth regatta in some high performance boats that would come from other nations, maybe those representing the teams. That's the one in progress. And then the other one is we are looking to work with the local Bay Area groups to meet our requirements with the city as to what we need to do as far as education for youth in the city of San Francisco, but also in the Bay Area as we see it a greater need. And the Sea Scouts will be part of that.
Thank you. And again, I'll just add a little bit to that. I do know that the Sea Scouts are represented within several meetings with the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary in participating in event control in the Bay.
Yeah, and also the Sea Scouts have a good presence at Aquatic Park, good partnership with the Park Service. So they envision this will create increased opportunities for that particular Sea Scout organization to show demonstrate their skills to the public and tourists.
The next question is, once more, what is Oakland's role? And I'll take the first hit on this. I do know that Mayor Kwan has appointed a representative, a staff member, to work in the planning effort. Mayor Kwan is also working with the yacht clubs, the ports, the harbors all along the estuary. So while we don't have any specific plans for Oakland's role, they could perhaps include a visiting event such as we just had with tall ships. So again, Oakland will have a role, and Mayor Kwan is certainly dialed in. She's very, very excited about meeting with this effort. Next question. Oh, panelists, you want to add to that for Oakland's role?
Well, I would say the Port of Oakland has been very involved with us through the Harbor Safety Committee to make sure we understand the shipping needs for Oakland as a major shipping port. And I would say our goal is not to allow any significant delays for commercial shipping traffic for any of the 7 ports that are served by San Francisco.
Excellent. So again, a role both commercially and for recreation. Next question. What opportunities will exist for the public to view the race from boats on the bay, controlled areas, and permits? And I think I'll take the first attempt at answering this. And short answer is none. In fact, we're planning on chaining all the boats to their slips and closing all ramps. So make sure that we have a good, no, that's not right. Okay, could the panel say the opportunities to view the race from boats on the bay?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, quite often I'm asked, will there be VIP viewing places on the bay that I won't be able to get to with my boat? And we never had any discussions with America's Cup Race Management about setting aside areas for VIP spectators. So our rule doesn't say where spectators can go, but it does define where spectators are not allowed to loiter or anchor or where they can't go. So by default, anywhere that's safe on the bay, a spectator will be allowed to go. We do create a transit zone along the city waterfront, primarily because we recognize that excursion ferries need to make that trip. That'll be used in 2013 with a larger race area. But that'll also be available for spectators and other entities to go transit along the waterfront to either get outside of the bay or to go around the race area. And if originally America's Cup had proposed having super yachts in 2013, which will help mark the northern boundary of the race area, depending on how many super yachts actually participate, we think that's a good idea because it will reduce the number of boats that you need for enforcement, but that shouldn't preclude other spectators from also getting those viewing spots as well. So if you think of Fleet Week, there's good places to be around the box, there's not so good places because of transit activity. Obviously, the commuter ferry routes and the shipping routes are not a good place for spectators to sit. We expect to have to move spectators around a little bit, keep them away from environmentally sensitive areas. And we're always mindful of the bathtub effect when the event's over. And everyone's trying to leave at once, and the safety issues that presents for small boats. My final point is the city is also doing a voter outreach program, putting together a voter information package, which we are involved with, and we see the Coast Guard Auxiliary having a good role of helping distribute that information to recreational voters, marinas, and yacht clubs in the Bay Area, so that people know about the services available in San Francisco Bay, and they know what to expect if they come watch the America's Cup.
Excellent. Other input into this question? John?
I'm going to put the flip side on that one, and this is from an experience that we had in Plymouth, England. We had a hill that really overlooked the entire race course, had a big screen TV up there, they had the concessions and everything, and the start and finish line was just directly underneath this hill. We couldn't have scripted a better place, and we had a really windy day, and boats were capsized, and there was all kinds of activity going on, and we're on the committee boat looking back at this hill with about 30,000, maybe 40,000 people on it, and they're all looking at the TV screen, which is set down at the bottom of the hill, yet the live activity is going on right in front of them. The TV is so good in that that it does take away from some of the live stuff, and if I was actually on the water, I'd be missing out on that, and that's what we're hoping to do, is to try and really bring it to the beach. So I'm hoping that there'll be lots of space for spectator boats because everybody's going to be watching the big screen TV.
The final question I have, who is going to take the lead in coordinating the various city committees who are putting together events to celebrate the Cup?
I think the Coast Guard should.
The Coast Guard is clearly not in charge of that. But I will say that the city has a monthly meeting of the various committees and subcommittees that they've assembled to put this event on. And part of that is a opportunity for small businesses to have an entry into this event and ways to increase their sales. And I think they've had a lot of dialogues with other cities as well, and have had those questions asked of the city of San Francisco. So I would say that's a good question for the city.
And perhaps a role here for Association of Bay Area Governments. Are there any further cards for us? John.
Question, the lawsuit on the adequacy of EIR, what is the status, and could that actually force the America's Cup back to Rhode Island?
a positive announcement tomorrow.
You heard that first here. We are going to now take a 15-minute break. We're ahead of schedule. We'd like to thank the panel very much for